worked on the articulation of some new solutions for, in particular, academic course content, we became aware of an incredible activity that was underway in the UK, championed by Professor Ian Hargreaves from Cardiff University, who took on a challenge given to him by David Cameron to lead a commission to understand how intellectual property framework supports growth and innovation. In other words, the economic contribution that copyright, if properly framed, could provide to the economy. The work that he has done on that inspired us many times, didn't it? And he's been recognized with an appointment as the commander of the Order of the British Empire for the accomplishments that his team made in completing this. We're delighted to have you with us, Professor Hargreaves, and eager to learn from you.
I didn't realize how carefully you had thought about the relationship between these talks. But to have Frank open up with Dickens and Charing Cross, where I worked for many years, and then to find that Davis opened his presentation by talking about his health, I thought there's some trick going on here. You may notice that this is not the title that appears in the programme. Copyright, the creative economy and the politics of the machine. Exactly. This is Martha's title. So I thought I'd give you both titles and then see if I can make sense of connecting them, which is what I'm aiming to do. But here's my medical bit. That's my back as seen through a CT scan conducted in a hospital in Brussels, Belgium, 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I woke up in the middle of the night with a very bad pain, and I thought that maybe I wouldn't make it to Stanford, so I've got to get better. I've got to get to Stanford. After I'd paid my $40 for this scan, I thought it was quite a good price for a scan, $40 in Belgium. So if you need a scan, go to Belgium. I left the hospital with a lot of pills, some advice, and a CD of my scan. So when I got it home, I thought, I can't wait to get this up on my computer. Here's a little section of it. But of course, what's it got to do with copyright? What it's got to do with copyright is that this is subject to copyright. Everything that's created in media is going to be touched on by copyright in some way, raising questions like, who owns this? Who's got the right to copy it? I certainly don't own it. If this is a photograph, the photographer owns it, naturally. Not the subject. Does the subject have any rights? Well, maybe I've got some rights in privacy about who can take this. But copyright kind of tends to see things as a problem, which you can then make money by solving the problem. This is also an opportunity. How does this picture, maybe this is one tiny fragment that's going to be useful to some medical researcher researching herniated discs, which is what it turned out I had, although you can't see it on this picture. How would we make this data available so that a researcher might find it and feel confident that they could use it, that they could analyse it along with data from a million other scans and so on. So that's the backstory. I thought that by this time in the afternoon you might like to hear some music. Oh yeah, I've got to do this. This is slightly differently set up than on my computer.
Sitting in a park in Paris, France, reading the news and it sure looks bad. They won't give peace always a chance. There was just a dream some of us had. Still all lines to sing, but I wouldn't want to stay here. It's too old and cold and settled in its ways here. All the California coming home. I'm gonna see the folks I dig. I'll even kiss a sunset peak. California coming home.
Nobody knew who Charles Dickens was. Does anybody know who Joni Mitchell is? 1971, it's nearly 50 years. It's nearly half a century since Joni Mitchell recorded Blue. Actually, it's like, the 1,000 things you need to do before you die. One of them is come to Stanford and play a Joni Mitchell song to an academic audience. I feel, I'm okay now. I'm feeling better about myself. It's a great song. Oh, so the point, though, is what's in red. Europe, too old and cold and settled in its ways. Well, we'll come back to whether Europe is too old and cold and settled in its ways. Here's a very short history of copyright. I'm not going to read it all out. I'll shorten it by summarising the phases. Here you see copyright invented at the beginning of the 18th century, or codified in England under the Statute of Anne. It takes another 80 years before the US has a Copyright Act granting a duration of protection which has been subsequently greatly exceeded, but in memorable language, like a lot of early language in early American constitutional and legal texts to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. More crucially than any other piece of legal and constitutional activity was the First Amendment to the Constitution, prohibiting restriction on free press and free speech. I'll come back to more than once to just how significant that is. 1841 was the first year that an American judge cited fair use, and we'll come back to all of that. Fair use is the defining character of the American approach to copyright. And then we find that as we get into the 20th century, copyright is getting more and more strong. It's covering more. It's providing rights that last longer and longer. But in the United States, it continues to be balanced by a fair use defense against the allegation that you have breached somebody's copyright, and that is important. And the global system, legal framework for copyright spread pretty much everywhere until it's actually right where the point in Frank's two charts. Look at that date, 1994. You start to get laws that are responding to digital. Before that, there has been panicky response to some other technology developments. The video recorder was memorably called by a lobbyist from Hollywood equivalent to the Boston Strangler with regard to its effects on the American people and the American movie industry. And here, by the late 90s and into the century that we're in, we have a really bifurcated approach to copyright, where the Digital Millennium Copyright Act is, on the one hand, offering redress to anybody who busts a technological protection system or mechanism of the kind that a lot of software has on it and DVDs and other devices have on them. At the same time, protecting against liability for breach of copyright internet service providers, so the people who provide the platform. Then, much more recently, we get this. we get this, and 2011, we get this. Now, what you're familiar, I will guess, with what these things are. These are quite ambitious pieces of legislative activity designed to address the problems that are being defined by the media and entertainment industries, who by now are using every means that they can to try to defend their business models. This is a campaign that happens in Europe, unprecedented in Europe, that here's the Anti-Counterfeiting Trade Act, and this is a rather portmanteau piece of trade agreement that has been agreed by the time it gets to the European Parliament over most of the world. And the European Parliament, a young piece of European democracy, stops it, massively votes against it, following an online campaign. My review actually started out before the Stop Piper and the Stop Acta, but the coincidence of the timing is clearly important. I started work on this review in November 2010, and it was published in May 2011. And that timing reflects both it may not be the peak, but it might turn out to be something like the peak of anguish in the media and entertainment businesses about what digital is doing to their business models. But certainly, whether it's the peak or not, it was a point at which there was a willingness to consider something different. I need to mention, in parenthesis, that in being asked to do this piece of work by the Prime Minister, David Cameron, who, when he introduced it, by the way, said that one of the motivations for calling for this review was that he had been told that UK intellectual property law would have made it impossible for a company like Google to get started in the UK. His reward for saying that was that his speech and the subsequent review was quite often, still is sometimes, referred to as the Google review. The point of this slide is just to say, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not really an IP expert. I mean, IP is a very, very complicated area of law. People spend their whole lives specialising in it. I am not one of those people. I am actually a journalist who has spent most of the last 10 years working somewhere between academia and business and government. These are just three of the papers that I work for. The local paper up in Yorkshire, great headline there. The Financial Times, where I was deputy editor, and the Independent, which I was editor, and that little illustration there picks up the Independent's marketing campaign. The other thing that influenced me is this. I don't know how many of you know Wales. There it is on the left-hand side of the United Kingdom, the bit between England and Ireland. Cardiff, which is where my university is just there, next door to Bristol. And the Heart of Digital Wales is the name of a report that I did for the Welsh Government in 2009, 2010, when they asked me to advise the government on their policy towards the creative industries. And it was that actually that started to get me interested in copyright. Here is what my review, the review for Prime Minister Cameron, said right up front, let me just give you the chance to read those two short paragraphs. Could it be true that these 18th century laws, whose purpose is to create economic incentives for innovation by protecting creators, that today they're obstructing innovation and economic growth? The short answer in the work that we did, 6-month project, was yes. But this was immediately following the next paragraph, as written in the review. This does not mean that we must put the creative industries at risk. They too need change. As Frank said, it's a market issue in the form of more open, contestable and effective global markets in digital content, and a setting in which enforcement of copyright becomes effective once more. This review is not about making a case for the abolition of copyright. That case is made, that it's redundant in the digital age. I don't believe that. I believe it can be reformed, that it needs to be reformed, but there is a danger that unreformed copyright comes with a very heavy price. So the main specific points in the review, main places look rather odd. Base policy on evidence. As Jamie Boyle from Duke University wrote at the time, what else would you base it on? Voodoo? The tarot cards? Or there's been very little application of evidence to policy in the area of copyright, because copyright being in most parts of the world, though not here, an unregistered right, you don't have to say, I've got this right. It's not like patent, where you have to register your patent. It's quite difficult to know what is going on, and there is a shortage of good data. A very good piece of work done by the National Academy here recently on addressing the need to stimulate empirical research that will give us some of that evidence. I made the argument, I see the local digital copyright exchange is advertised over there. A digital copyright exchange is a concept. It's not a thing, it's a concept which basically says it has got to be possible in a digital age to use the technologies that are causing all these problems for the creative businesses, to use the same technology to get a reasonable digital price in global markets on things. Choice is infinite, but people will make those choices, and I agree with Frank, they will willingly pay to make those choices, but if you don't give them the choice because you've locked what you've put out into the world into some geographic window or some kind of platform restriction, then you should be less surprised that people will try and get it by other means. The point about European licensing being borderless is a problem you don't have in the United States. You don't have any significant boundaries in copyright law. In Europe we do, and that's a big problem. Orphan works are works that nobody knows who owns them. A vast trove of our past is tied up in archives where libraries and archivists don't even have the legal right to preserve the last crumbling copy by copying it. So there is nonsense on stilts at work in parts of this system. Patent thickets are the issue very familiar to people in Silicon Valley, of people patenting up stuff or buying patents from other people, not in order to do new things, but in order to stop somebody else doing new things. Quite a difficult problem to deal with that. We didn't come up with a convincing answer to it either. Then there was stuff on the design sector, and quite a bit of stuff about education and non-commercial use and institutional issues which are a bit more UK specific. The government's response to this piece of work was to say that it accepted the arguments and that it would take the necessary legislative action. People who've been around in copyright know they've heard that before. So it's right to be sceptical about whether or not there'll be political follow-through. So far there has been, but the process is not yet complete. It is due to be complete in April of this year, so we'll know soon whether that deadline is met. The last attempt to reform copyright, which followed a review conducted by a former colleague of mine called Andrew Gowers, that got caught up in the last general election in the UK and was mangled in the process. So this list here is a list of areas of life or types of publication or zones within copyright where reform, in my view, is needed in the UK setting. UK law itself is, in this area, framed by European law, and which is why some of the reforms also call for action at the European level. This is Deauville in France, May 2011. I think you'll recognise the front three people there. President Sarkozy in the middle with Angela Merkel, the most powerful woman in Europe, and on the other side, Eric Schmidt of Google. This was a very significant event, I think, the Deauville so-called E-Summit, and it happened on the day that my review was published. That was not planned, but it was a coincidence. This was the summit at which President Sarkozy made the argument that the rules that govern the internet need to be set by democratically elected politicians if the internet is going to itself continue to succeed as a democratically responsible activity. Eric Schmidt, when asked what he thought about all of that, said that he didn't think that the answer to the problems that politicians said they were, or the people who elect them, were encountering with the internet, such as surveillance, invasion of privacy, hospitability to vast and unquantified amounts of pornography, including child pornography. Eric Schmidt said that he thought that the solution to these types of problems lay with the technology and not with regulation. A hugely important context, I think, for copyright is this wider debate about the internet. And that's what, in my A title at the front of this, when I refer to the politics of the machine, that's what I'm talking about, the politics of the internet. The view of the engineers in tension with the view of the non-engineers. So here's the European Union. This is a quite recent statement, December the 2nd, 2013, in which after initially among the relevant powers in the European Union, the response to my work and to the fact that the UK government then took it on board and said it intended to act upon it, the response certainly face-to-face when I went to see people over in Brussels was that they were not very impressed with what I'd had to say, and they didn't expect it to trouble them too much. 2 years on, nearly 2 years on, we 2.5 years on actually, we find the European Commission, Michel Barnier, who's quoted in the second paragraph there, it's his part of the Commission that's responsible for the laws on intellectual property in the European Union, actually sounding as if they're quite interested in this process of reform. And you see a bit in Eurospeak, but this issue of territoriality in the single market and harmonisation, that's all about Europe's problems that arise from it being 28 nation states. And although there is much overarching legal framework, there is a great deal of difference within states, and that's a problem. If you take the view that the European Union's formational achievement was to abolish trade restrictions between the original member states, and that is the foundation of the prosperity of Europe in the years following World War II, then the idea that we should not aspire to have a tariff-free and unified or unitary market in copyright goods, I think is hard to defend, although this is a track of thought which is very, very controversial among creative businesses. You also see here some reference to sorting out licensing in Europe, which echoes my argument about the need for a digital copyright exchange. So is Europe too settled in its ways? Well, it's easy at the moment to be scornful about Europe, but this is a reminder that the Berlin Wall is now a tourist attraction. Those are my daughters witnessing it for the first time. And it's only a couple of years ago that the European Union was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its achievements in human rights and things that matter to all of us a great deal. So not everything since Joni Mitchell made up that song in 1971 has gone wrong. Quite a lot has gone right. But this is a chart I borrowed from the European Commission itself, among others, and it's a wearyingly predictable subject in Europe, that Europe has got a deeply embedded productivity problem, and the most obvious remedy for that involves a more intense and momentous approach to innovation. And if the argument is accepted that copyright in the way that it is working represents an impediment to innovation, and we'll come on to that a bit more, then that's probably where the energy is going to come for changing things in Europe. I wanted, before pulling together the threads here, to mention, without taking the time to talk about in any detail, the kind of work that I do now in my position at Cardiff University. You'll see that it's the REACT Creative Economy Knowledge Exchange Hub has got quite a lot in common with MediaX. It brings together academics and businesses and working with themes, much the way that Media X does. It seeks the magic of collaboration. And sometimes you get it at thrilling speed, and sometimes you find yourself driving into very muddy territory. That's a big piece of work. This creative citizenship is a theme. I'm doing a number of things about that are in the copyright zone, of which the most urgent, because I've got to finish it by the end of this month, is right at the bottom there, a review of text and data mining. If anybody in the room has got any thoughts about or insights about text and data mining and its place in American research and academic life, I'd be really pleased to talk to you after the formal part of this meeting. And I do a lot of other things, having come into academia not via the classic route of working hard for a PhD and becoming a very good teacher. I came in through journalism into a journalism school, and these are some of the other things that I'm doing different kinds of work with as well. Oh, and that's my book. I've forgotten that was there, with a nice little Amazon look inside. This is one of those short books that's meant to tell you everything you need to know about some massive subject. I mean, journalism is obviously a very easy subject to tell you everything that you need to know. But other entries in this catalogue are things like God or time, and those are much more impressive than mine. But I think mine is not too bad. I've just been working on a new edition of that. Interesting thing to do, because 10 years ago when I did the first edition, of course, digital was very new in terms of the scale of its impact. And the last 10 years, again, ref Frank's charts, that's when it's got really grim. And it has been really grim in Europe and North America, not everywhere. But in Europe and North America, it's been grim. I remain an optimist about the future of journalism, but I won't unpack that argument at this stage. I agree with the Yochai Benkler network public sphere argument about the new ecology of journalism, and although that is fantastically disruptive for professional journalism, it will, in my view, give us something which will be different, but in all sorts of ways richer than what we have, although it will be less good at one or two other things, maybe more than one or two other things. I do want to just talk a little bit about this. This is the biggest piece of work relevant to copyright that I've done in the last year. This is an attempt, very much using the UK example. It's about the UK, but it's a piece of work that's attracted a lot of international interest. And it attempts to make an argument about what the creative economy is of the UK, could apply to any country, what sort of approach or set of approaches you might want to take if you are a government or some other body trying to think of how you get your creative economy to prosper. The inspiration for doing this work came sort of out of the work that I'd done in Wales, which I mentioned, trying to look at the creative industries in a small country on the edge of Europe, and the copyright work. Here are just 4 or 5 slides about that. So this just gives you a flavour of the history of the creative industries in the UK. That book there with the name Chris Smith on it. Chris Smith was the first politician to be given the job of Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport when Tony Blair became Prime Minister in 1997. And before that, Britain had a Department of National Heritage, and it moved, many thought, controversially, to having a Department of Culture, Media and Sport. And you can guess at all of the fears that awakened among one set of people and the excitement that it engendered elsewhere. This book, which is actually a collection of Chris Smith speeches, but it very much caught the mood of the time in its style. But when I went back and looked at that again, I had the feeling that it had been surprisingly silent about the internet, and surprisingly, I thought, complacent about the state of the creative industries in Britain, rather assuming that things were going to go on very much as they had. And I was also puzzled about what was going on in the middle years shown on this chart, when the numbers say the creative industries, the blue line, are doing fine. I mean, it's a period of boom. This is the Blair boom, and the one that ended in really after this chart is over, but in through 2008 into 2009. That off-the-cliff experience in that chart is nothing to do with the economy collapsing. The economy is roaring along. It is, as the note says there, it results from a change in definitions. Why was there a change in definitions? Because the creative industries people, the publishers, the music people, the television people, the film industry people, didn't want to have software and computery stuff in their business. They wanted to be the creative industries over here. They did not want to be this kind of computery stuff over here. And, you might think, well, why is that interesting? Well, it's interesting because I think it is part of the view, which is strong in the UK, the resistance to reform of copyright in the UK arises very significantly from the argument that what the UK is good at in this zone is creativity. Shakespeare, Dickens, the Beatles, all of that, the biggest creative industry sector in Europe. That's true. That's Britain's. And if you do something that makes digital easier in the wrong way, if you let the strings go here, what you're going to do is put money in the pockets of people from here. Because none of the companies that are framing the digital platforms on which all of this new activity is taking place are British or European. They're all American. In fact, they're all from one bit of America. And so I thought that you should be aware of the concern that this occasions. However, if you, rather than thinking about these creative industries, put the computery stuff back in, and in fact, if you do more than that, if you go, as my colleague, the economist who worked on this did, go right through all the standard industrial codes that make up the economy and all the job classifications that make up the economy, and develop criteria which show the creative intensity of different occupations, what you actually find is that whilst there are 1.4 million jobs in the creative industries, there are 1.1 million in the wider economy, and that actually creative talent itself, 59% of it, is working in the wider economy. The creative industries are characterised by having people who are more specialised in creative stuff. But you've got creative people, you know it, one or two people have said it today, being very creative in this electronic digital space. But not only there. These days, one of the ways in which digital is remaking businesses in health, in transportation, in advanced manufacturing, is the application of, or the making possible of, a more creative way of working. And you take these numbers and apply them to the value added, the GVA, the gross value added in the economy, and you find that the creative economy of the United Kingdom, by this definition, is about 10% of the value created in the whole economy, which makes it bigger than other industries that we think of. Not that creative economy is an industry, but it makes it bigger than other sectors, which are themselves large and important. So our argument in this manifesto is that this is the right way to think about creative. And tellingly, when you go back to 1997 and the creative industries as defined at that particular time by those particular politicians and their advisors, their definitions of creative industries say that these are industries that make use of intellectual property rights. They write intellectual property rights into the fabric of the definition. And my view, our view in the manifesto, is that that's not particularly helpful. Not because intellectual property is not important. It is very important right across the economy. It's increasingly important, just as economies, advanced economies like Britain's, like the economy of the United States, involve more investment in intangible assets than tangible assets these days. We don't need to frame all of this around intellectual property, and to do so hems us in a way that will cause us problems. I'm not going to embellish the two slides here with just a list of, it's just to share with you, okay, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to strengthen your creative economy? Well, these are the areas that we identified where, sorry, there's a typing error there. These are 6, and here are the other 4 things that we said that we might do, including, you won't be surprised to see number 9, which is we recommended that the government follow through with the reform of copyright. So, just starting to pull this together then, you will be more aware than I am that this question has started just recently, I think, again to become a big question. It's a frequent question in the history of all of our countries. But this is The Economist magazine, I think, of last week or the week before. This is the resolution wasn't too great, but that's a tornado ripping through the office. And the argument is that the next wave of digital, there's a new book out from Brynjolfsson and McAfee at MIT about the second machine age, an argument that the next wave of digital is going to be even more potent than the first wave, because it's going to affect everything, and having already had pretty dramatic effects on labour markets in some business sectors, that it's going to be possible to automate much of what lawyers do, much of what accountants do, because this has already been said again here today, this is about automating the brain, or not automating the human muscle. And those who are making the argument, raising the warning signs highest, are saying that the next wave of technology is going to be associated with helping to propel a further push in the divide between the very rich and the very poor, because there's going to be a swing, it's already happening, towards return on capital versus return on labour. Here's another twister. This is WikiLeaks, the film about WikiLeaks, the Fifth Estate. That's Benedict Cumberbatch over in the grey. I don't know how well Benedict Cumberbatch is known in here. He's known, yeah. He turned up even in 12 Years a Slave, I noticed the other day. So the WikiLeaks, mass leakage, Bradley Manning, all that, I think is a very, very significant development in what is going on in journalism, as indeed more up to the minute is this man Edward Snowden, and the issues arising from this are numerous, but the speed at which the big American technology companies protested about what the Snowden leak showed the NSA has been up to in terms of surveillance and where they get their data from. The speed at which that has been sort of settled and quietened down, I think, will be considered suspicious in other quarters. This in a world where this is a map produced by the Oxford Internet Institute, which shows in red the places where Google is the most visited online location, in blue where Facebook has that distinction, and green is China. This is a way of playfully thinking about the colour of maps and the way that political and economic power is expressed. I've noticed in one or two events that I've been to recently that the United States is increasingly spoken of as being an outlier on issues to do with the internet. I wouldn't say I hear that about copyright, although you could make the argument that the United States is an outlier on copyright because of the tenaciousness of the American belief in the First Amendment to the Constitution and its defence of free speech and freedom of the press. And what we undoubtedly see happening is a resistance to an American-only or an American-designed or an American-dominated view of what the internet should be, which I'm not making a particular point on one side of an argument here. I'm saying that I think that this is significant. When we have, clearly, President Clinton famously said that the idea that China would be able to run its own internet within its own boundaries would be like nailing Jello to a wall. Well, the Jello's up on the wall, and not only with regard to China. So I think that this huge issue, I think it's going to be a huge issue in the next 5 to 10 years of the governance of the internet. There are currently 42 different bodies involved in the governance of the internet. And that may be a good defence against the wrong things being done, because the that stops stuff being done. And that's, on a happy day, that's what I think about it. On a less happy day, I worry about it. But Martha challenged me to say something about future-proofing, just in finishing off. And I thought, well, I actually like Frank. Was it Frank or was it Davis? Anyway, I thought, what did I think the future would be last time I tried really hard to think about the future, when I tried to think about the future of journalism in 10 years ago? I thought, well, I've been reading a lot of Manuel Castells, great Spanish sociologist, who wrote 3 very influential books on the network society in the 1990s. And I'd quoted him in my book on journalism as I was trying to capture what I thought the potential of the internet was for journalism. And this is the summary of that, which picks up this issue of the tension about the net's domination by American interests. And, you know, that's obviously a distinctively non-American take on the subject. But I particularly like the second part of that thought, that the internet is a malleable technology susceptible of being deeply modified by social practice. So something to be discovered by experience. It's the expression of ourselves. Now, of course, a term like the expression of ourselves doesn't take you to hard realpolitik, but it points to a humanitarian, a humane, a global, a beyond nation vision, and need to stay with a vision about what this is all about. So if you apply that to the workaday business of future-proofing copyright, I think that what you say is that you reform it. Here you build on fair use. I think that what we're trying to do in Europe is to try to get some of the flexibility that in this country you get out of fair use in a system that's just very different in its legal structure. And we simplify, we make sure that we don't ever again get into overkill on enforcement, where we've been there and seen how unhelpful that is. And we may need to get a bit more precise, we may need to nail it down a bit more, and we absolutely will have to address these economic issues and these market issues, because if we don't do that and don't support it with consistently collected evidence, copyright is going to get caught in the ringer between what consumers are doing and the anxiety which you see growing in Europe, that we are not finding our way back to a way of innovating ourselves out of productivity stagnation. Now, people don't go around thinking about productivity stagnation, but they sure experience the consequence of it if that's what you get. But to end on an optimistic note, here is Tim Berners-Lee at the London Olympics, lighting up the arena. I see that he has started a new movement called the Web We Want. These are heroically simple motivations. I suspect that a dose of heroically simple is what we're going to need to hang on to through what I think are going to be quite tough times for the politics of this extraordinary machine which you all and the people who come from round here have done so much and do so much to bestow upon the rest of the world. Thank you very much.